Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast, the recap of Stage 8 of the Tour de France from Saint-Maine-le-Grand to Laval-Espace-Mayenne. We had a time trial here in 2021 today, somewhat curiously in the glorious weather with not too much wind, not too hot, on the the second Saturday of the race.
Yes.
We have a sprint stage with no breakaway, and tomorrow we indeed have a similar pancake flat sprint stage, 171 Ks, a solitary categorized climb with just 1 point available, and it's not near the start of the race. There's no reason to go in the early break because that category 4 is with 15 Ks to go, a very slight rise of 900 meters at 4%. That's the only climb on the stage except the finish. The finish is uphill, 1300 meters, 3%, but actually with 600 to go, as Benji said yesterday, it gets a little bit steep.
Luke and I had an idea today. Well, I had an idea and we discussed it. How about you get 1 UCI point per 10 kilometers in the breakaway at a Grand Tour? Imagine marking each other to prevent other teams from having UCI points.
It'd be crazy. Like Picnic would be going in with Arkea, with Astana would be given a complete... completely changed the complexion of the first half of the race.
Yeah.
But it was a bit of a shame. I mean, for the spectators or people watching on TV, there was no race. And I think, there's no breakaway. Some other news from yesterday, Joao Almeida was able to continue. He says he has no severe injuries except a cracked rib. So that sounded actually ominous because, riding with a cracked rib is not easy. But then in the peloton, he actually looked pretty fine today. He was chatting to Vingegaard when they zoomed in on him, so he made it through the stage, maybe with no problems, or he made it through okay, although it was an easier day. Dunbar couldn't start this morning. I think he injured his right arm, and Haig was out yesterday, so they were the after effects of the crash.
And Butrago continues as well. That was also explained by Bahrain Victorious on social media. But you said it. No breakaway at the start of the stage, so not that much action to talk about until the intermediate sprint. And gotta say, the intermediate sprint had a similar feeling to some intermediate sprints we've already seen, but Intermarché was a team taking it on. And on other intermediate sprints, we sometimes see the team of Lil Trek taking full control. I felt like it was more Intermarché that had to control in the final kilometer towards that sprint. And they basically have a last man for Binyam, who is on the left side of the road. And usually what happens is there's a left bend towards the actual sprint finish here. Usually what happens is the lead out in front of Binyam would open up the gap between him and the barrier on the left side for Binyam to be able to sprint through that gap towards the line. Perfect that would be, but that's not what happened. Basically, is the problem that Milan jumped past Binyam and past his lead out so early that the Intermarché lead out reacted too late?
No, by the time the Intermarché lead out started jumping, it was 3 or 4 seconds left in the sprint, so it was, again, today, Intermarché Wanty were doing a lot of general controlling of the race, but when it actually came down to executing the lead out, both at the intermediate sprint and the finish, they were lacking compared to Little Trek. And Little Trek do have the firepower, but still, there's a good lead out here with Lawrence Rex and co. for Intermarché Wanty, so I think Trek just keep getting it right with Sturven and Consoni, or more correct, and Milan's just fast. At the end of the day, Milan is just way faster than Binny, so he can jump earlier, safe in the knowledge that Binny's not going to come out of his wheel so easily and beat him in a sprint.
But also at the intermediate sprint, Binny just felt like he never really started a sprint on time in the first place, never got out of the wheel of his lead out before the other sprinters did. In doing so, was destined to finish 4th at the intermediate sprint, which he did, which means that he's losing 20, 17, 15, 13. That is 7 points relative to Milan that he is losing at that sprint. Milan takes the full 20 because there's no breakaway. So Milan extends his lead in green, but will he do the same at the finish line? Guess we'll find out. MVDP and Pogacar not sprinting for green, not a surprise. We said yesterday that we feel like Van der Poel doesn't give a fuck about green.
And I think he said that in the press now. He's like, I don't want to go for green.
And on the other side, Pogacar, he's not focusing on green at all. That's not his priority here. If it comes his way, he will take it, but that's not his focus. Anyway, next up, we've got the run-in towards that K1 point that you mentioned, but it's a long run-in. It's like...
Well, straight after the intermediate. Straight after, Total try to use it as a launch pad. And one poor Matteo Vercher tries to go off the front, and Quinn Simmons or a Wanty start chasing him. And I'm like, oh, but then it was Soler afterwards started to chase. But then also Trek, I was like, that's a bit mean, you know? They're going to get caught. It's a Saturday afternoon. They're a French team. They're maybe just going for the KOM point. Eventually, but the curious thing was indeed, as Luke just said, Soler and Wellens moved up too. UAE also didn't want anyone to go on the break because they wanted Wellens to get a free KOM point again.
I'm sorry, but that should not be the focus of UAE at the moment. Anyway, Verchet Bourgodeau, being the two riders up the road, that breakaway, it's fun and all. It gives us something to look at on TV because otherwise the stage was a bit of a disgrace. We move further into the race. KOM point is incoming. Gap to the breakaway starts at the foot of the climb, maybe at 40 seconds. Maybe goes up to a minute 10 by the top. So Peloton didn't get much closer there, but they take the KOM points away from the Peloton. And after that climb, we see the gradual increase in tempo in the Peloton. But to bring it back to the sadder part of the sport, we had a crash by Jonas Ruch on one side of the road. It was hard to see what happened because the camera was way back and it happened somewhere a bit further up in the Peloton, not at the front, but like 2/3 into the Peloton. We saw him crashing and laying there. At first, I thought he was unconscious, so it was good that we saw him moving relatively fast after that. But to me, it looked like he hit the floor pretty hard, and that Aina Rubio's bike hit his head quite hard as well in that crash. And I was shocked by the fact that we immediately had Intermarché bring a bike out, which, fair, that's okay. But that he directly jumped on the bike and he continued on the race. I don't know if there was a concussion check there, but it felt like a little amount of time for that to properly happen.
Yeah, Ruch looked knocked out, and I hope he finished okay. But yeah, it's again reigniting the concussion issue in where's the liability lie? He's not a GC contender. He's not going to help the sprint lead out anymore. Is it, can you take a beat and have a proper concussion assessment? That probably should be happening in that situation. What if he crashes again because he's concussed? We don't know if he is. I assume they'll do it after the race, but he still has to complete 15 Ks on the bike. And indeed, there was a crash by Soler today, looked quite minor, just through some road furniture. And then the run up to the sprint after the breakaways caught, there's a lot of mechanicals.
Mm-hmm.
I think because it doesn't seem that populated outside the villages. There's space to move up, but it's gravel. There's maybe some mixed road surfaces in this area. And we see a mechanical for Merlier at 13 Ks to go. There's then a crash by, I thought, Naelens.
Yes, correct.
And Pogacar was a bit deeper in the peloton. He was to the right of that. Through a roundabout, it looked like Naelens had a flat, put his hand up, and then turning through the roundabout, he went down. And then Merlier's back in the peloton in 4Ks. Penaway has a mechanical, but both of them didn't have a teammate waiting, Benji. So that's going to cost a lot of energy because the drag race had started.
It's one thing. Okay, didn't have a teammate waiting immediately, but when Merlier came back to the peloton, it did look like there was a quick step rider with him that brought him back up. I don't know who it was, but it seemed like someone was there. And when Penaway was coming back behind the UAE team car, a teammate was there as well. So I think it was just a reaction time thing, as in they weren't there yet while we saw it on camera. Anyway, outside of the mechanicals, crashes, etc., we saw different strategies from the GC teams again and how to position in this final. We had, if we look at the previous sprints we discussed in the past, we had a sprint where Remco was trying to keep himself at the front with Cataneo, etc., while Jonas and Tadej were trying to keep themselves at the back of the peloton with a buffer around them, so they had time to respond to any crashes happening in front of them in the peloton. Today we had a slight change in that. Remco and Poggi were the ones that were sitting towards the back trying to keep a buffer around them, and it was Jonas that was fighting at the front for a position. And I gotta say, there were a few intricate moments there. For a lot of the time, they were in control. They were in the second position with Jonas, with a rider in front of them, maybe Affini for a while. But there was also a moment where Vingegaard was on the left side of the road, and we see then a wave coming over, led by Matteo Jorgensen, who wants to get to his team. So he wants to get to his team by going over the top of the peloton to the left to then wade back and then be ahead of Jonas. But in doing so, he brought an entire wave of people across, which then brought the Visma Lease bike train a bit backwards into the washing machine. And that was a moment where I was a bit scared for Jonas and potential crashes. Did you feel like there were other moments, maybe when he was moving up on the right next to Tudor?
Yeah, Vingegaard, him and Pogacar had two very different strategies for navigating this final hectic 10Ks. Vingegaard wanted to be at the front at all costs. Indeed, he's sort of undercutting the Tudor lead out. And then once they get to 5Ks to go, they move to the back. Pogacar was more at the back, leaving some braking distance. And yeah, playing with luck a little bit, but also statistically, probably not going to get put on a gap if you have teammates around you, if you know the roads are wide enough that they're not going to get blocked if there's a crash.
What is the math around that? Because in these sprint stages, we've got something called, is it called the 3-second rule, basically? Where when there's a gap in the peloton, let's say with about a kilometer to go, and that gap is 10, 20 meters at the finish, that's not enough for the gap between those groups to be 3 seconds, and therefore that gap will not be counted in the results page. So the gap needs to be longer than 3 seconds, but if the peloton is going at 60 kph, how many meters is that roughly? Is that like 50, 60 meters?
I think it's 50 meters, which is pretty far.
So basically, if you're a GC rider, you can be on a gap of roughly 40 meters, 35 meters, and be comfortably within the 3-second rule at the finish line, and you will be counted in the fast group.
And there'll always be riders sort of dropping back, and it resets. It has to be a full gap, so there's always going to be some random rider in between you. It's only if there's really an uphill sprint where there can be actual gaps, and maybe they don't have the rule for that. But yeah, two different strategies. In the end, it made no difference either way. Vingegaard probably had to spend a bit more energy, and Jorgensen was helping him in front to stay in front, and then they went to the back. And then the trains began. Alpecin were way too early. Like they were, and there's 3Ks to go. They're already at the front with 3 guys, Ricard, Van der Poel, Groves, and then there's a downhill. I mean, we can talk about gearing, Benji, and restricting gearing, modifying equipment. In the last 3Ks of a Tour de France Saturday stage, there's a downhill into a roundabout.
80 kph.
Where they're hitting 80 kilometers an hour. And they're all fresh because it's not been a hard stage. That's asking for maybe not increasing the risk of a crash. But if there's a crash in that roundabout, people are going home. People are more likely to get life-threatening injuries because you're going 80. And yeah, you have to question why that is not the main thing being looked at before changing a handlebar width.
This is the second time in the last week we talk about this. The last 2 sprint stages, this one and the one with a chicane in the last 350 meters and a bend on the finish line. I'm sorry, but Thierry Gouvenou is like making these parcours for the Tour de France, etc. I've been so critical about the fact that that guy is in the safer commission when he can't even make safe finishes in the biggest race in the world. And I understand, yes, a certain city wants a certain finish, wants it to finish next to this beautiful like area in their village, whatever. But there has to be a line where safety is more important than money, and at the moment that doesn't feel like it's the case.
Yeah, just different priorities. Also, and then indeed the riders are incentivized or take risks. So we saw in a roundabout, I'm not sure if it was that one or the one afterwards, Caden Groves was not on his train. It was maybe Ricard, Van der Poel, Consonni, Sturven, Milan, and then maybe even Ackermann. Van Aert was around the back, and then Groves tried to dive bomb Milan through a roundabout. It was disgraceful, actually, and I think pretty sure it was Groves.
Yeah,
and like not okay. Nearly crashes Milan. Nearly crashes himself. Luckily, Milan's so big, he just bounces him off. If he crashes there, guys are going down at 65, 70, and it was also unnecessary. Like, why is he trying to go ahead of Milan in that moment? It's still 2Ks to go. I feel like a lot of these sprint teams went too early.
I agree with that, but back to the Groves point before we continue. I fully agree. That's a disgraceful move. He's basically dive bombing a corner to get to the front, not thinking about the risk for the riders that he is dive bombing. Because 100%, when you see that, you know that it could cause a crash.
But he wasn't going to make it. Like,
100%.
You can dive bomb to assume a position in a 90 degree, but like, Milan is going to go to the apex or the roundabout. It was a crazy move.
In Gent-Wevelgem, we saw the Jordi Meus doing a dive bomb into a corner that ends up causing a crash because he goes too quickly into the back of people. Here we see Groves doing a dive bomb into a roundabout at a higher speed that could cause actual crashes, but the crash did not happen. I want to see the UCI give a yellow card in this situation because that is a move that should be disincentivized.
Yeah, and then the other hand, a sprinter will say as well, you have to take risks. You have to, try to move up positions, but
not risks that put other people in significantly more danger than the average risk in a sprint.
Yeah, it was also strange because then when you look at the last K of this sprint, Trek are gone. Alpecin are gone. They've just got Van der Poel, and Groves trying to go back to his wheel. Van der Poel has to wait for him. Sturven's gone. Consoni's gone before Sturven. With 1K to go, Milan is on his own. Van Aert is there. Bini has nobody. He has no lead out at all. Lund Andresen, I think, is being led out by Bittner, so they switched it today. He does a good job bringing him up, but now it's uphill. So the last 6 from 700 to go, it's a little bit more uphill, and it's Trentin who waves over Trek. He does a good job. Van Aert gets in that wheel. He's got Naesen, but it's still too early. Like, because it's an uphill sprint, the timing kind of put off all the teams, but you wanted to already be in position at this point. I mean, when you look at who finishes this sprint in good position, Van Aert, Milan, it was the guys who then could surf from that front position. And when Penway, I think it was, got brought up on the uphill section, it really killed his legs. That stretches it. The FDJ lead out, he gets bullied off his own lead out. Milan just takes that wheel. Dainese goes into third, Van Aert fourth, and it's still not control. Stewart, who frankly is a better option for Israel Premier. I don't know why. Why is Jake Stewart leading out Pascal Ackermann?
Don't ask me.
Like, Jake Stewart beat Milan straight up in the Dauphiné.
Yep.
Ackermann hasn't looked like he's capable of... Ackermann's got consistent results, but he hasn't looked capable of winning a sprint in...
I would never ride for Ackermann in that situation.
Yeah, I don't understand. They were washing up the right-hand side. Van der Poel leads out Groves on the left. Milan splits the two, goes onto Groves' wheel. Van Aert gets boxed off his wheel by Vandenberg. He goes onto Ackermann's wheel. And then there's still a pause. Even like Van der Poel, Milan was going to launch, stopped his launch, and then Van Aert's going to jump from the back, and then Milan launches about the same time as Groves, who has the inside, but Milan's just way too quick. Van Aert's able to get into his slipstream a little bit, but Johnny Milan with clear air, with no help in the last K, but he was able to surf really well, wins the... Did he win the UAE uphill sprint?
Yes.
Yeah, well, you picked him for today, and he delivered. Without Merlier being there, Merlier couldn't make it. It was really, no one got within a bike length of him, and he wins his first Tour de France stage ahead of Van Aert, then Groves third, Ackermann fourth, then Dali a bit better today, Andresen sixth, Coquard, Dainese, Albanese, and Fred Heim running up the top 10.
Super strong win by Jonathan Milan. He looked like he was suffering a bit in the run-up to the final sprint, obviously, because it's uphill, but it's one of those finishes where there's not a hill with 10 kilometers to go that puts him over his limit. And we've seen at the Dauphiné that those are the ones that really saps his energy out. In this case, it just makes it a longer effort at the finish line, which for Milan seems to be a better option than having a climb with 10 kilometers to go. And we see the result of that. Jonathan Milan wins quite convincingly. Pretty fantastic sprint by Wout van Aert. Was quite impressed by that. But I do have to do a little side note. There were some moments in the sprint where... Remember Jonathan Milan, who was complaining at the intermediate sprint against Binyam because Binyam gave him a bit of a bump during the lead-out towards that intermediate sprint to push Milan out of the Intermarché train? Milan did that twice today. He won't be thinking about it like, oh, I did exactly what Binyam did. He did exactly what Binyam did. His reaction was so over the top against Binyam. He apologized for that, but this shows that he does it himself as well. Just wanted to point that out. That being said, doesn't it take away from the actual strength of his victory? But I would say it was a sprint stage.
But speaking of the Biniam and Milan,
yes,
big change in the green jersey. Bini comes 19th, no points. By the way, it was Lewis Askey sprinting because Penway didn't make it back. So I think it was Cyril Barth leading out Askey for the final sprint. The points jersey, Milan goes into that outright ahead of Pogacar. He's on 192 points. He has a 46-point lead. And Bini's in third. Now Milan has a 68-point lead on Bini. That's pretty significant. We also have another pancake flat stage tomorrow, also with an intermediate sprint, which of course is right at the start of the stage. And Milan's winning every intermediate sprint ahead of Bini. He's much better flat sprinter. This was even what we would say is a Bini-style uphill sprint.
Yeah.
And when you
look in Narnia.
Yeah, he had no lead out. He just had no lead out at the end. So I think, I don't know why once he sort of rode with 7 guys right on the front all day, I don't think that really makes a difference in the end. But
yeah, but it is like, we spoke about this when it comes to GC riders. At the end of the day, this is a stage with 0 riders in the breakaway for most of it. And you've got Intermarché taking up the most of the positions in the top 10 riders at the front of the peloton. In doing so, you take more wind than being in the belly of the peloton as well. So these details matter at a race like the Tour de France, where you want that 0.5% at the finish line, stuff like that. So that's a mistake. If you want to control the breakaway, put one rider at the front, the rest of the team tries to keep themselves in a safe position, but in a position where they don't take as much wind. And when the race starts hammering in speed upwards, that's when you move towards a position where you want to be in a really safe position, whether it's at the front, in the last 25 kilometers, or for GC riders, towards the back with a buffer around you like Pogge and Remco today. Anyway, that's when it comes to Biniam. I agree with you. I'm still on the page that Milan clears this after Philipsen is out of this race. But
it's between him and Pogačar. Like, Milan still has to do everything right. It's if Pogačar goes on a run and wins another 5 stages, Milan does have to do everything right. But in theory, even with just the intermediates, he should be able to take this, just with taking the right intermediates.
Especially because a few days ago you were like, listen to me, you fucks. Every intermediate sprint is at the start of a stage, gives 20 points, etc. Almost as much of a mountain stage, or equal to an actual mountain stage, right?
That's true. Well, like tomorrow, if Milan comes second tomorrow and wins the intermediate, he takes another 50 points, then he's nearly 100 points ahead of Pogačar. And then with other intermediates, then Pogačar, even if he wins 5 stages, and they're going to be 20-point stages, some of them, it's looking heavily in favor of Milan, and maybe he even wins tomorrow. So, I
actually disagree. You've got a stage Chinon to Châteauroux, 174 kilometers, mostly flat, intermediate sprint after 23 kilometers though. But that's the way it flows basically, that stage. There's not much else to say about the parcours, to be honest. But I'm going for Tim Merlier.
You're going for Tim Merlier. He had bad luck with the mechanical today. The final straight is 1.5 Ks long tomorrow.
Perfect for Bert.
Perfect for Bert. They go south in the first 40 Ks or so, then they head east, and then they zigzag their way to Châteauroux, where I believe Mark Cavendish has a street named after him. This is a kind of famous sprint finish in the middle of France, before we head to the middle of France, around Clermont-Ferrand, for the Central Massif stage on Monday even. And so, what do you think about 2 pancake flat sprint stages on this weekend, Benji?
I don't like it.
It's a bit odd, isn't it? I mean, I'm not saying we haven't had plenty of action across the race, but we don't have to work during the week. So it's fine for us to watch Motor Britannia yesterday on Friday.
I understand that Monday's Bastille Day, so in France it's a holiday. For a lot of people around the world, it's not a holiday on Monday. So they will be working. It's going to be harder for them to watch the race. They will probably have like their browser open and I'll tab a few times if they work at a desk. But it's going to be... The reality is, in the weekend, more people watch cycling because they have more time to watch cycling. That's the main storyline here. So to have 2 flat sprint stages on that weekend, you're taking away from potential great stages that could advertise the sport of cycling on days where more people are watching. And then, yes, Monday's going to be a great stage, and more people in France will see it on Bastille Day. But it's a shame. I saw an article by Thierry Gouvenu who was explaining basically that the reason is the topography of the Tour de France, the way that they're trying to move from one part of France to the other part, to the Massif Central, etc. But design a better parcours then, mate.
Yeah, they're trying to go from Brittany to the north and then quickly get their way to the hills in the middle of France, and they can't just go drive 2,000 Ks or 1,000 Ks and do that in one go. So they do have to have transition stages. I do think it is good that we have some off days, and it's just unfortunate that the timing is both of them on the weekend. And the difference is also there is no breakaway. Like, this is a difference to cycling even 3 years ago. I don't remember very often having Tour de France stages where literally no one goes in the breakaway.
Yep.
I think it's a little bit like excessive control from they're going to control to the intermediate sprint tomorrow. It's the first 23 Ks.
It's not control.
But just let Total jump in the break after that. Like, don't be mean.
Yes, but I agree with you about after the intermediate sprint, let people go in the breakaway. There's also a reason that a lot of teams don't do it anymore. If you look at UNOX, if you look at the Tudor, at the top level pro teams, those pro teams care about UCI points instead of sponsorship exposure on TV anymore. That ship has sailed, that era of the sport has sailed. If I look back at the start list of, let's say, when I started watching cycling, the 2005 to 2012 era, if I look at 2008, for example, the start list, and I drop down towards the pro teams, and I look at it and I see quite a few pro teams where I'm like, okay, these teams will want to go in the breakaway to go for potential sponsorship exposure into the breakaway. And it's weird because back in the day, it was less on TV.
Yeah, exactly. It's like women's cycling when they had almost no coverage. There was no concept of a TV exposure breakaway because it's pointless. And
now we have more coverage in men's cycling, but we have less breakaways in these flat stages because teams care more about UCI points than about the sponsorship exposure in the breakaway.
yeah, it's somewhat strange.
Maybe people have realized that just being in the breakaway for a little bit doesn't exactly give you that much financial value as a sponsor. Is that something?
Probably the teams and the sponsors are wanting you to be competitive and get like a competitive result rather than just waste. And they're thinking, okay, well, it's a waste of energy. I'll focus on a different stage. I think I can forgive them for a day like today. There's so few sprint stages. You just know it's never going. Quinn Simmons will ride behind you all day. You're on a social ride. Stages like yesterday, where it is a bit hilly, where there's only one team controlling, we already said it, but there's a little bit less. Yeah, if you're not getting in the break, then I don't know what you're doing.
But also back in the day, if I think about the era of Agri Tubel and so forth, then they had Romain Fayou going for a sprint, but they still had another random French NPC in the breakaway. So they were actually hedging their bets in sprint stages, the French pro teams back in the day, which you don't see on stage like this anymore. And I understand that on paper, yes, this breakaway will never make it, but it's not about making it with the breakaway. It's about trying to put pressure on Little Trek. The sad part is that Intermarché then helps control, etc. So that makes it much more difficult.
I'm going with Milan tomorrow. I think there's just not enough firepower from Quickstep to stay in front. There's just Burt. Without Catania, I think that's a big loss to keep them in front position to 5Ks to go. And so I think Trek they just got more firepower to keep Milan fresh.
Okay, that's great.
But it is one with a long straight. That's Merlier shooting from the back special to come back to the front. So.
If Merlier gets to the wheel of Milan, I think Merlier beats Milan.
Yeah. But he's got to be there.
Exactly.
So, okay, that was our recap of Stage 8. A bit of a sleeper, but you can't have every stage being absolutely crazy. And everyone finished the stage today, but everyone finished, including Jonas, which came in. Thanks for listening as always, and we'll see you with a recap of the Chateau Rouge sprint tomorrow. Ciao, ciao, ciao.